really fortunate today to have three incredibly accomplished engineering trained professionals who have gone into law and into policy. So I will introduce them to you in just a few moments. We do have a few event norms that we wanted to quickly go over. We would ask that you keep yourself muted during the panel, and this is just so that our sound quality is good. And we also wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this session. Speakers will be spotlighted, so it's very unlikely that your image would appear, but if you want to make sure that your image does not appear, then it would be great to keep your camera off, except for when we do a breakout group, which we will do at one point. And lastly, we really want to hear from you. We want to make time for your questions. So if you have questions for the panelists, please feel free to put those into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. So before we begin, I wanted to offer a land acknowledgement, and this is something that we do at the beginning of all of our events. And for those of you who aren't aware, a number of years ago, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission created a report that had 94 calls to action as a way of addressing the systemic racism towards Indigenous people in Canada and helping to raise awareness and change policy to bring greater equity and restore the damage that has been done to a lot of Indigenous communities. And one of those calls to action was to acknowledge the land and the people on which the land we are working has a long history with. So I want to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We will post a link in the chat, or maybe it's already there. If you, depending on where you are calling in from, this is a wonderful link. You can hover above where you are and learn about the Indigenous peoples and histories of the land that you are currently residing on. So we recommend stepping into more of that learning when you are able. So our agenda for today is I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for the first part of our panel. There will be a breakout opportunity for you to quickly connect with your peers and discuss what has come up for you as a result of hearing from our panelists. We will then have another opportunity for some more panel questions, and then we'll have an opportunity to take questions from you. So that gives you just a sense of our flow today. So I now have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. And I have to say, as I was preparing to introduce our panelists, I was absolutely struck by the level of accomplishment of these panelists that we have with us today. I know that all of you have received their full bios, so I'm not going to read the full bio in the interest of time, but I wanted to highlight a few things about each of our three panelists, and then I'll invite them to say hello and share a fun fact about themselves. So I'm going to start with Izzy Caulder. Izzy Caulder is a partner, lawyer, and patent agent with Bereskin and Parr here in Toronto. Prior to attending law school, Izzy graduated from U of T's engineering science program and obtained a master's degree in the field of algebraic control systems. Izzy does a whole bunch of service work and contributes at U of T in many ways, but something I wanted to highlight is that she mentors student startup teams at the Entrepreneurship Hatchery. And she's listed in the 2020 Canadian Lexpert Dictionary as a most frequently recommended lawyer in Canada, and is also listed in 2021 as a best lawyer in Canada. So welcome, Izzy. Thank you for being here. And we'd love to hear your fun fact.
Okay, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to see all the squares and to be, just helping you hopefully on your journeys. Essentially, my fun fact is I actually love comedy and I love improvisation. And I took a number of comedy improv classes at Second City and another place called Bad Dog Theater, which is just on Bloor Street there around Ossington. And I have to say, learning improv has been one of the best things for my legal practice. I work with a lot of startups, work with a lot of different clients, with different ways of working and different perspectives. And I find just having a sense of humor makes a huge difference in terms of working with people. It also helps when you're trying to collect on bills that are not being paid. So that's also helpful. You can, adopt a bit of okay, what can we really work out here? And I find improv is really great for so many relationships that you have in your life, that kind of thing. So that's my fun fact.
Amazing. Okay, thank you, Izzy. So the next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Saeed Kaddoura. And Saeed is a senior analyst at the Pembina Institute, a nonprofit think tank that advocates for strong policies to support Canada's clean energy transition. He holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and 2 master's degrees. Saeed works on different facets of the energy transition, including green jobs modeling, electricity and urban freight emissions reduction, corporate renewables procurement, and depolarizing conversations. This one really struck me around climate change. In 2018, he was named as one of Corporate Knight's top 30 under 30 leaders in sustainability. So welcome back to ILead, Saeed. And what is a fun fact about you?
Thanks so much for having me, and I look forward to the discussion we'll be having today. If I was going to pick a fun fact, maybe not so fun, I would say interesting pandemic related. I actually just moved back from Alberta to Toronto in June, took advantage of the remote work environment, moved here after being away for almost 3 years. So it's definitely nice to be back. And on that note of depolarizing conversations, it's really interesting to see in a way the different perspectives that people have on climate change and the difference between Alberta as the energy capital and really in Ontario. So that's definitely been a learning experience of mine. So I look forward to answering any questions that you guys have on that front. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay. So our third panelist, Claire Kennedy, such a privilege to introduce her. And again, please look at these full bios. They are really remarkable. Claire Kennedy is Senior Advisor of Clients and Industries at Bennett Jones, helping clients solve their most complex legal matters. She is recognized as one of Canada's leading lawyers in tax and transfer pricing, and is also a seasoned board director and professional engineer. As the lead director of the Bank of Canada, Claire brings her governance and industry expertise to the board of the nation's central bank. Claire has served on the University of Toronto's Governing Council since 2012 and has been chair of the Governing Council since 2017. And in 2015, Claire received the Citizenship Award from the Professional Engineers of Ontario. So what an amazing set of accolades there. Welcome, Claire, and we'd love to hear a fun fact.
Okay, a fun fact about me is, I suppose just behind me in my living room, some of my most prized possessions are actually some rocks from 78 degrees north in Svalbard, which is an archipelago east of Greenland and a couple of hours flight north of Norway. And also from, coincidentally, 78 degrees south, which is on Mount Vinson, the highest mountain in Antarctica. And I was on an expedition 5 years ago to climb that mountain, which was a very cool experience, the hardest 10 consecutive days of my life. And I say that as a mother of teenagers. I will never eat another granola bar again as long as I live, but also one of the coolest experiences of my life.
Amazing. Okay. Wow. All right. So let's dive in here. I know our time is short and students want to learn as much as they can about your career experiences and what it's like to work in law and in policy as people who were trained in engineers and then found themselves moving in these directions. So my first question, I'm going to go to you, Izzy, and then to Saeed. The question is, as a student, how did you discover that you were interested in this career field? So Izzy, we'll start with you.
Yes. Okay. So as a student, I mean, I was always really involved in student government, engineering society. I actually eventually joined engineering's SAC, the Student Council, on behalf of engineering and advocated on behalf of engineering. And it's always, basically, I feel like I've been defending engineers all my life. I wrote a piece in the newspaper. I think, I'm trying to remember which newspaper it was. I worked with the Varsity and then on the other newspaper. And I actually wrote a full page article on how fantastic, engineers are, building solutions for society, because I think we got into a bit of trouble during orientation at some point, and so we were in a little bit of trouble. And I wrote a big article, really saying how important engineering students are and the work that we're going to be doing in the world. So I decided to get into student council. I was on SAC for a couple of years, I believe. And then I continued with that when I went to work as a student, as an employee at Bell Northern Research way back when. And so I remember getting in touch with somebody. I made a wonderful friend, a female lawyer who was in IP, intellectual property, at BNR. And I developed a really lovely friendship with her. And I realized, she was a senior to me, of course, but I realized that this would be a wonderful area to work in. So, a lot of the journey has been dictated by the friendships and the connections that I've made as a younger person. And I really try to make those connections for younger people now.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I love what you said at the beginning, that you feel like you've spent your life defending engineers. That's great. Saeed, how about you? How did you discover that a career in policy was a fit for you?
So actually, my career in policy really started, I would say, maybe 5 years after graduating. It all started, and if I'm going to talk about energy policy specifically, it all started with curiosity. I was an undergrad. There was at the time 3 minor streams. One of them was renewable energy, and I picked that up, and I realized it's something that I was really interested in. At U of T, there's a sentiment that we're typically supposed to be either consultants or academics work in graduate school. Obviously, the options are really massive beyond that. So after working for 2 years in consulting, realizing really working in the civil engineering sector in Toronto, which is massive, I realized that there was something more that I needed to explore. My maybe only thing that I didn't have a chance to do when I was an undergrad was to publish a research paper. So I realized, let me go back and then actually drive really my master's in that direction. What am I curious about? What do I like? And talked to a few professors when I was pursuing my master's, and I realized that actually, if you think of policy, it's in a way problem solving or helping governments and businesses achieve a specific agenda, way more than it is from a consulting perspective. How do you get companies to generate profit? So I went back, I realized, I have this interest in renewables. We're at a tipping point when it comes to the energy transition. So there was a bit of a synergy there, helping both provincial and federal governments really think about how we're going to navigate this transition. And just following my curiosity really led me to where I am today. So if I'm going to give you guys any piece of advice, it will be that, I understand that finals and exams are pretty stressful, and it's hard to navigate through the academia part of it, but really value this time as a chance to explore what you like, explore what it is that you like to do and where you'd like to be working, and make those connections with the intention that, this might be where you're going to end up working for a long time after you graduate. So take advantage of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. This next question, and I'm going to challenge you all to be as succinct as you can here. The next challenge or next question, thinking about students who are listening and thinking, how did your engineering education sort of prepare you for these fields? Where are the synergies here? So what are the greatest synergies between how you were trained to think as an engineer and how you're trained to think as a lawyer and policymaker? And I might just challenge you all to kind of pick one place of synergy that you could share with our group today. So Izzy, let's start with you. Actually, sorry, Claire, I'd like to hear from you. Sorry, Claire.
Sure, no problem. I think that's an easy one. It's a stepwise or logical approach to problem solving.
Okay, thank you. Izzy.
Exactly. I would echo that. So just a problem solving approach, sort of, take away a lot of the noise, take away a lot of the, a lot of things that really don't matter, maybe things that are to do with ego, and focus exactly on doing the best absolute job you can, based on the constraints that you can see.
Okay, thank you. Saeed.
I was going to say it in a little bit of a different way. I definitely agree with that. If you look at your degrees, it says applied science before it says engineering. So really being able to apply the scientific knowledge to make decisions on the best path forward is in my opinion, I think one of the best skills that I learned.
Okay. It's really neat to hear of that problem solving approach and how it can apply in different places as a tool and as a skill set. Thank you. So Claire, this next question is for you. And we know that careers are twists and turns and there's ups and there's downs. So I'm wondering if you can tell us about a setback that you experienced in your career and what helped you navigate it.
Great question. And I think a lot of times when people encounter this question, you get the advice, which is true. When a door closes, a window opens, find opportunities, keep an open mind, that kind of thing. But what you don't really hear about is sort of how to actually do that. And I will say that I've learned from the School of Hard Experience. So this is maybe a little more a do as I say and not as I have always done in my life. But I think it's really, really important to keep an open mind and a very calm sort of sense within yourself. And this is going to sound a little bit flaky, but I think that really a mindful presence around this question is so important. Look, it's very natural when we are rejected for something, when we don't get what we want, that we feel resentful, we feel anger, we feel we want a do-over. Those are all normal, and you can experience those and you can vent to your friends, but really try and find it within yourself. And maybe you can go back to the hiring manager. Maybe you can talk to your boss if it was an internal promotion that you didn't get, with a really calm, open mind. And I would say a real sense of curiosity. And that's something that all engineers naturally have. You probably wouldn't be in engineering if you didn't have a sense of curiosity. So come at it almost kind of in an abstract way, like you're inquiring about somebody else or another person, and be really curious. And in your mind, try to make the case for why somebody else got the job. And that'll, release you from this trap of, but you didn't understand what I said, or you didn't see this in my resume, or I kind of flubbed that answer, but really, and you will learn a lot more if you have that sort of almost kind of a detached curiosity about it. And then keep a journal and write this down, and you'll reflect on it. And I guarantee you your performance will improve.
Thank you. That's a really insightful answer, sort of about the inner skills of coping with setbacks and disappointments. And thank you. So our next question is for Saeed and then for Izzy. And the question is, given the systemic and pervasive inequities that we know exist in systems related to race, class, gender, how do you advance equity and challenge the status quo in your organizations? So Saeed.
So I think that's a really interesting question, because in our organization, when we're dealing with the energy transition from a perspective of solving climate issues, we have to recognize that climate issues are not really separate from other social issues like gender discrimination, poverty, and racism, for example. So we really need to start to examine climate change through an ethical and a political lens, really, rather than a scientific one. This 99% of scientists agree that climate change is an issue. So why can't we put our heads together and solve the problem? Thinking about energy specifically in Canada, we need to seriously think about what we want to keep from the age of oil. It's not just necessarily about the science, but we need to re-examine equity issues within those industries. So anytime that that specific type of people or a specific type of knowledge is left out, we're actually missing out on a lot of valuable information, valuable insights, and creative solutions when we leave people out of the conversation. So I think the best thing that we can do is to do our best to make sure that there's there's sufficient representation, because the best way that you can empower somebody to be involved is for them to see somebody who looks like them in that position. If you're an Arabic person and you aspire to become a CEO, it helps a lot when you see an Arabic person in that position as an example. So I think it's really important for us to look at this opportunity as a way to just take advantage of fixing the system now that we have an opportunity for change.
Thanks, Saeed. That's really powerful, and it's really clear that you are actively working to advance equity issues in your field and bringing this into a much larger dialogue. So thank you for that. Izzy, I'm curious, this question to you. How are you doing this in your sphere?
Absolutely. And this is a great question. Thank you for asking that. So I've been at my law firm, Bereskin and Parr, for over 20 years. I like to say I married my first boyfriend because I went there as a first year summer student and stayed. And I really feel very comfortable in this firm environment. It is a very diverse and inclusive environment. It's in our DNA, we like to say. Mr. Dan Bereskin and Rick Parr formed the firm back in the 60s, 1965. So, you know, we're at 56 years now. And they formed the firm on a very inclusive basis. You know, they were Jewish at a time when it was, you know, difficult for them to start their practice, and there was, you know, a certain amount of racism going on. We had the first female patent agent at our firm, and we actually named a patent prize after her, which was wonderful. She unfortunately did pass away a number of years ago, but you know, our firm has really always been very inclusive. And I remember looking at the different law firms, going for interviews and looking at the brochures and just being in their reception area. And Bereskin and Parr, you know, just had, you know, you could just see the diversity in the people that were there, and sort of the modern, fresh approach that they had to things. Now, I've been very active on the Diversity Inclusion Committee for a number of years at Bereskin and Parr. I'm very pleased to say we just won the Chamber's Diversity Inclusion Firm of the Year Award for Canada. And so that was a huge accomplishment for a boutique firm like us. You know, we are only about 80 lawyers and agents, but it just really shows that as a committee, you know, we've been extremely hardworking. It's a wonderful group of people, and it's been very easy to work in my firm environment to advance these issues. I've recently joined a wonderful organization called Chiefs of Intellectual Property. We are starting the first Canadian chapter. It's quite a big organization, mostly based in the US, but we're starting the first Canadian chapter here in Toronto. I'm on the leadership team for that, so I'm very excited about that. It's women essentially from different parts of the technology and the legal areas around IP. So I'm very excited about that new project. And if anybody listening is interested in getting involved and learning more about CHIPS, we are on a big membership drive right now. We would love to see some people come in from this call. That would be wonderful. So please contact me afterwards. And again, mentoring is, I think, one of my big passions. I spend a lot of time mentoring within the firm, mentoring within U of T Engineering through the hatchery. Starting to work at Ryerson now as well. You know, I just really love empowering people in a way that I can, which is around intellectual property, about the rights that they may have in what they're creating, you know, their creative works and their technology ideas, that sort of thing. So that's how I pursue that every day.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. It makes me think of students who are considering careers in these spheres. And Saeed, I heard you talking about representation, and Izzy talking about really open commitments to inclusion. That's part of the culture, and you see it being worked for really actively, and something for students to be aware of when they're thinking about the kinds of environments they may find themselves in. So thank you for that. We are going to move into an opportunity for a small group breakout. And in this breakout, what we want to invite you to do is you'll have 6 minutes in a breakout. This is an opportunity to say hello to some other people who are on the call and to make some connection. The questions for the breakout are to quickly share your name. What have you heard so far that has inspired or sparked your curiosity? And what additional questions do you have for the panelists that you could put in the chat when you come back from your group? So we hope you enjoy the brief conversation, and we'll see you back in 6 minutes. So continuing on here, I have a question for Claire and then for Saeed. And just a reminder to mute yourself, please. If you are not a panelist, that would be fantastic. So we'll start with you, Claire. And the question is, when you really drill down to what motivates your work and gives you that sense of purpose, what is the change or the impact that drives your efforts?
Make something better.
Hmm.
Improve an organization, improve a person's life, improve a client situation, improve an outcome for somebody somewhere.
Okay, thank you. And Saeed, how about you? What's kind of at the heart?
I think cynical people might tell you that humans by nature are greedy. I disagree. I think it's this thing that we call the tragedy of the commons. If you have an unlimited access to a resource, you're just going to naturally act in your own self-interest. So realizing that the challenges that we have ahead of us in the next 20, 30, 40 years really are going to need for us as a collective society to overcome that idea is one of the things that drives me in a way. How can we push our societies forward in a different direction than we've done for the last I would say 200 years since industrialization, maybe more even. And if I'm going to give a piece of warning to people interested in pursuing policy, it's the fact that you're not necessarily going to see a change from day to day. You're not going to go to bed on Friday realizing that what you did on Monday has a significant impact, but it's actually going to be those cumulative weeks that you're going to realize year after year, oh, we're actually advancing in a direction. So don't be dismotivated. Is that a word? But just keep going at it, recognizing that let your vision really drive you and let your interests drive you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So my next question is for Izzy, and then we're going to wrap up our questions. And I think there's going to be some questions from the group, which is awesome. So what was a skill? We thought this would be a question that students would want to know about. Law school applications, LSATs, things that are really relevant and resonant to students who are thinking about a career in law. Izzy, can you tell us what skill you had to draw on as you made your way through the law school application, and what helpful supports you used to help you get through that process?
So I think I mentioned, on my journey, I met this wonderful woman who was an intellectual property lawyer at the time at BNR, and we developed a friendship, and we had a lot of lunches, and she told me about sort of what it was like to practice. She gave me a lot of insights in terms of what the day-to-day work was like. I started to buy, a few books on Latin and on legal terminology, and I just developed a real interest in policy and legal issues as it pertained, as I found out later, to technology. So, my big insight, I think, going through the journey is, the power of hybrid, the power of taking one skill and marrying it to another skill, and then being quite unique when you have that hybrid and you're able to provide value based on that hybrid. So in terms of practical skills, in terms of, yes, I want to try this, this second part of my hybrid, I want to get into law school, a big part of it is just, and for me, I need to be super prepared. And so you need to know yourself. And I think, being mindful is really core at success for everybody. But I think you need to know yourself. If you need to be super prepared, then go be super prepared. Go and get all the old exams. Go and develop a plan for yourself. Work with a mentor or two to help you motivate you, as a bit of a personal trainer to help you do that. For example, I was mentoring a team at the Hatchery for a recent pitch session with Y Combinator that just happened last week. And we had weekly meetings. And I was going to miss her because I was mentoring her and we were having a wonderful time. And so we've actually decided to continue our mentoring sessions. She's going to be going into a graduate degree, and every quarter we're going to check in and we're going to see her progress. She's in the climate field, by the way, Saeed. I will be connecting you with her. But I think having that sort of support in your life to help you pace yourself and set a plan, I think is really important.
Okay, thank you. And I love what you said about sort of the power of the hybrid and thinking about what are the different skill sets that I bring and the interests that create a unique combination, and to really kind of stand behind that unique combination that we bring and that everyone here on this call has. So further articulating it and understanding it, presenting it and standing behind it is really interesting, in addition to what you shared about the process and all the learning. So thank you. Our final question here, I want to go to Claire first in terms of law, and then Saeed in terms of policy. What is the most challenging aspect of working in policy and law that you would advise current students to be prepared for? So Claire.
Be comfortable with compromise, be comfortable with ambiguity. And I think that's often hard coming from an engineering background where we're used to a very binary analysis, something is right or something is wrong. And understanding that if you want to be effective in a role, you have to create opportunities for usually multiple stakeholders to win something. So one of the things phrases that I come back to is it's not about truth, it's about proof, which came from my criminal law prof. But what it means to me, and I write it down frequently, is it's not enough to be right. You have to be persuasive. And to be persuasive, you have to create an environment in which somebody is going to agree with you, go along with you. Might not be their number one choice, but they have to feel that they've been heard and that they're not implacably opposed to what you're doing. So brute force is not the way.
Okay, wow. There's a lot to that answer that we could we could dig into there. I love what you said about creating opportunities for multiple stakeholders to win something. So there's a real kind of collective mentality there. So that's really powerful. Thank you. Saeed, how about you? What has been a challenging aspect of working in policy that you'd want to sort of share with students who might be considering this field?
I think Claire really said it much better than I could ever say it. And it's the idea that there is, we have infinite problems, but we have really finite resources. So in a space where there is no right or wrong answer, you have to be able to critically think what's the best path forward. And a big part of it comes from figuring out which solution is the one that benefits the public good more than the rest. Now, this becomes especially challenging in times when obviously there's a lot of sentiment around maybe climate denial, and those voices with the power of social media could be really strong, sometimes demotivating. But you have to realize that we're moving in a specific trajectory, and that type of resistance doesn't come out of people wanting to be evil. It comes out of actually the idea that people might feel that this new direction is threatening to their own livelihood, to their own existence, to their own jobs. So if you can really pivot your solutions in a way that shows, this is going to be a difficult time, but there is a role for everybody in this transition. It's going to be inclusive. Nobody's going to be left behind. Those are really the best positions for us to put forward. So thinking through some of these critical ideas will just help you filter some ideas over others, I would say.
Thank you. I hear a link between these two answers as well, of that these decisions are often not black and white. There's many shades of gray, and it's like, which one is the best? But it might not be 100% the best, but better than the other, and all those compromises. Thank you. So before we go to a Q&A, I just have some rapid fire questions for you. These are going to be super quick. So looking for like 1 sentence answers to this, and I'm going to direct them to different members of our panel here. So Saeed, first question is for you. Top 3 things that students should look for in a work environment.
Good colleagues. I would say good work trajectory. So knowing that you have space to grow, and interesting work that you actually like to do. It's not about the money.
Awesome. Okay. Izzy, best piece of career-related advice you ever received?
I think it's along the lines of what Claire was saying. Just be aware of yourself, be aware of your inner strength, and make good decisions when you're in a good, mindful place. I think that's the most important thing.
Okay.
Do not act rashly.
Great. Okay, thank you. Claire, what do you need in your life to be happy in your work?
What do I need in my life? A sense of purpose.
Okay, Thank you. Saeed, one thing that you do to support yourself when you're feeling defeat or self-doubt?
I eat.
Good
I'm a
food
big
always
foodie.
helps. Awesome. Okay. Izzy, and this, I'm using the word teammate in this question, but you could replace that with colleague, whatever sort of works for you. Top 3 characteristics of an ideal teammate / colleague.
So openness, willingness to discuss things, just openness. Second one is honesty. And third one is creativity.
Okay, great. And Claire, last question for you. Is there a book or a podcast or anything else that has attracted your attention recently that you would recommend to students? Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, there's tons of really good books, actually. Hard to say. I really like biography. I find you can learn a lot of history, and through the lens of a leader or other other individual who's had some prominent role somewhere. Probably in that vein, if I had to do one, it would be the Abraham Lincoln biography, Team of Rivals, which is a parallel biography of Lincoln and his cabinet, and how much he drew people that were actually not like him, that were his rivals, into his cabinet. Really, really powerful book. They made a movie out of it, but read the book. Doris Stearns Goodwin, Team of Rivals.
Okay, it's a great suggestion, given what we're talking about here and leadership. So thank you for that. Okay, so we've come to the end of our formal panel questions, and Milan, I'm curious, or Natalia.
Yeah.
Natalia is monitoring the chat today.
Yes.
What are some of the questions that have come up?
Right, so we'll start from the top. Have you faced any ethical challenges in your work, and how have you resolved them?
So maybe does one of you feel inclined to answer that question? We'll try to get through a number of them.
I'll take it. I mean, I've been fortunate to work with really good people. So I can't say that I've ever encountered a situation in which, I was dealing with, some request to do something illegal or, improper or really anything like that. I mean, there's certainly, I think, from time to time, you can end up in situations where you're wondering, like, is this the best course of action? This might be good for me in the short term, and I could kind of get away with it. If you're hearing that little voice, it's probably time to stop, go to your mindful place, and ask yourself whether what you're contemplating doing is really resonant with your values. And if it's not resonant with your values, do not do it. You will pay a big price inside yourself, even if it works out externally, transgressing your values. And you know what your values are.
Lots of wisdom there. Thank you. Okay. Natalia.
I think the next one. How do you think we can stimulate more interest in policy and law among STEM students? How can we stimulate the interest?
I think that's a great question. And that's something that we're actually grappling with because, for our work on diversity inclusion, we really want to make sure we enlarge the pool of people who come through technical programs, go into law school, and then hopefully come and talk to us. So, we're always looking at ways to encourage. I think part of it is just having mentoring. I mean, nothing, as I've said before, I mean, that's the thing that really got me on my path. Having people that you can see and you can talk to and they're approachable and are, that there's nothing that can replace that sort of connection and that sort of guidance in terms of, here's a path and here's somebody that I can identify with and I can ask questions of and I can feel comfortable with. All of a sudden, it's not sort of on the other side of a wall. It's right there where you are.
So. Izzy, can I ask, because mentoring seems to have really factored into your life in a really significant way, how did you initially sort of recognize the importance of mentorship and how did you seek it out? I'm curious for students who are listening and hearing, okay, mentorship, it's so important. How do you do that? Anything you could
It's
share
about
there?
affinity. It's a very basic thing. It's about affinity. If you have something in common, if you find something, some area of synergy or some area, it can even be really silly. Just you enjoy the same show or you enjoy the same music or something that sort of brings you closer to that other person. And then, you find there's a bond there. Just to be open, as we say, be curious, be really curious about the people around you. And I remember actually recording a little message for the engineering students when they were coming into first year this year. A big thing is to really harness that curiosity, that instinct you have to look around, get out of yourself and just say, what can I learn? What can I contribute? Who can I, meet? What's my part of this? And I think that will hold you very well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so we had a question. What are the different ways to get involved in the field of policy during undergrad or after graduating? Or is it more common to enter policy later in life?
I would say there isn't necessarily a right moment. Just find the right opportunity. The best way is always to connect with people in the field and have these discussions. Start, if you realize you have an interest in it, start as early as possible. You might work for a year there and realize, no, this isn't for me. So I think take the early stages of your career to test different kinds of things. Work at a company, work at a think tank, work in a governmental department at a city office if you can, and just explore the different things. It's never too early or too late. It's just about finding the right window of opportunity that aligns with your own interests and values. So just pounce on that.
Great. That actually I think about career, or Saeed, when you were sharing about your journey into policy, and Izzy, when you were sharing about your journey into law, and mentioned kind of as if you sort of married the first boyfriend, you found your place and you stayed there and it has worked really well. And I think Saeed, maybe you've had a little bit more, some bends in the road and now you've kind of landed, but it took a little bit more of that, a little bit of journeying to sort of find your place. And that for everyone, it's different in that way. For some, things lock in really quickly, and for others, there's more of a journey to get to the place that you want to be. So great. Okay.
All right, we have another sort of systems level question. How do you manage working within a legal or political system that you may not always agree with or believe in, or that you feel is unjust?
Great question. I'm going to look to the lawyers. Would either of you like to like to respond to that?
I guess, I'll try and take this one. I think it, it comes back to what I was saying earlier about, being comfortable with ambiguity and being comfortable with not having a really strongly binary view of the world. So this is good and this is bad. The reality is that our world is far from perfect. Our society is far from perfect. The question is, are we on a trajectory of improvement? And I think that it can be easy, and maybe particularly in today, where there seems to be increasing polarization, along many dimensions, to really sort of take a step back and think about not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And most, meaningful, long-lasting changes in large systems, and a society is a very large system, a country is a very large system, an economy is a very large system. Actually, those good changes often happen fairly incrementally. There can be a rapid escalation, so you can get to a tipping point, but to think that you're going to change things overnight, I think, is unrealistic, and is, I think, also naive to actually think that nothing that's gone before was of any value, and that there isn't a sort of a responsibility to sort of reflect a bit on the change that you're trying to make. It doesn't mean don't be passionate. Absolutely be passionate, but be passionate in a way that actually helps you achieve your purpose, not in a way that is ultimately counterproductive.
Great. I hear kind of a longer view there, which is really helpful. Okay. Natalia.
Okay. So I think a lot of folks here, so there's one question that came up in the chat about that sort of transition, I guess, from engineering to making an application to go to law school, and sort of what that was like, coming out of engineering and going in, that whole transition application.
So I think I can answer this one. I think, you get to a certain point where you do start to learn about yourself. And I know when you're young, everything is so new and you're still really trying to calibrate yourself. But at some point you realize what makes you happy, and what sort of type of work makes you happy, or what frequency of work. And I can tell you one experience I had, in my job as an engineer, I had one big project to work on, and it was going to go for years. And I had to present, where we were in the project, every few months to the team. And that was fine, but it was one big project. And I started to realize that I actually am more interested in a few different things happening at, on a day. And my work now is extremely aligned with what I enjoy, which is new technology, 5 different new technologies on my desk every day, at different levels of their progress, whether we're just capturing them, we're filing them, we're prosecuting them at the patent offices, or we're licensing them later, or we're dealing with the issued patents and monetizing them. So it's, I realized that I did find the right place. And so in my case, it really was, let's have some smaller chunks of work to work on in different areas with more variety. And so I think being just aware of, what motivates you and what makes you excited about work in the morning, and whether it's academic work or in sort of non-academic work, I think just understanding those characteristics, whatever they are, and then trying to find a place that will give you that is so important.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we could end off on how you deal with discouragement.
Maybe if you each have something you'd like to say about this, that would be great. Yeah, Saeed.
I would say if your work is aligned with your values, with what you like, discouragement is, it's not a wall, it's maybe just a roadblock. Maybe remember that at the end of the day, work isn't life. After 5 p.m. or 8 p.m. or whenever you work to, that there's something that comes outside of work, sleep on it, come back with a fresh mind the next day. You might be able to find a solution as long as you're aligned to that North Star. It's just going to be a small roadblock.
Thank you. Claire.
Narrow your focus so that you can define success in smaller increments. I learned this really the hard way in Antarctica the day we climbed the head wall, which was very hard, very long day up a steep hill. And I brought my focus down to one step. Like I said, I only have to do one thing in the rest of my life. And that is I have to take one step. That's it. Went on like that for hours. But it was like that. So if you're discouraged and you're feeling that there's a setback, change the aperture on what you're looking at. So what does success, redefine success to be something small, and that is achievable. And then you will have positive reinforcement and you can go again.
Bite size. I love that. That's very wise. I would say along those lines, I mean, really essentially reframe what you're thinking about and sort of your scope to thinking about, the process, how you do something, what your goals are, your values, as opposed to the specific result that you've just received. So basically process over luck. I'm reading a wonderful book, but I just finished it actually, called The Biggest Bluff by Maria Konnikova. I was watching a Rotman, she was interviewed by a friend of mine, Kendrick Lowe, who's an engineering science graduate alumni as well, at the Rotman School. They have wonderful talks, by the way, with wonderful books that arrive in the mail once you've seen the interview. So Maria was essentially saying, she worked for the New Yorker. She's a writer, a psychology background. She learned poker in 2 years and became a champion. She was taught by one of the top poker players. And she basically said the big lesson she learned from poker to apply to life is the process. You have your process, you have control over your process. You don't have control over whether there's a position or whether there's some luck or there's some chance involved. You don't have control over that. So focus on your process, not on the result in any particular instance.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I want to thank you all for giving us your time and for this really rich conversation that I feel could go on longer, but I know there were so many nuggets and so many helpful insights offered. So thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. Big round of applause to the panelists. Thank you for being here. And for the students, thank you for coming. And we look forward to seeing you at our future Career Talk events. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.